This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today we have one of our more popular guests, and his name is Marin Katusa. But why he is so popular and he's influential at this time is because could what Marin's going to talk about, which is carbon credits, more important than Bitcoin? That's the question. And then once again, we do not recommend at Rich Dad, we don't recommend anything. It's up to you, make your own decisions. We're not financial advisors. But just for full disclosure, Kim and I are investors in Marin's company, and it's in the carbon credits business. Offsetting, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her Green New Deal, as we said, God bless her, because she's making us richer because she's making the environment a very, very politically hot corporate. You have to look like you're politically correct and environmentally correct. So carbon credits is the offset to it. And of course, socialists won't make any money, but the capitalists will. And so,
which is always the case.
Yeah.
The capitalists always figure out a way to make money.
So I want to thank Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for making us very rich people. Any comments, Kim?
So our guest today is Marin Katusa, and I'm curious. He's the author of the book, The Rise of America. And I'm going to have to ask that because I just see the demise of America.
Well, it's relative to Canada.
Low blow. That's where Marin lives. But he's brilliant in the world of resource and research, and this carbon credit I knew nothing about 6 months ago, and fascinating to learn more. His website is katusaresearch.com. So welcome to the show, Marin, and we're going to learn a lot in this episode.
It's my pleasure always.
So I got to just ask, The Rise of America? Where did that title come from?
It's still going to happen. When I came up with the phrase, the first thing I did was, that's kind of a good phrase. And as I was doing all this research, and I paid $1.99 for the URL from GoDaddy. And that tells me that it's so contrary. Nobody's thinking it. Okay, so that's how contrary it is. Go come up with any other phrase you can think of, and somebody already owns it, right? Look, as bad as it is in America, trust me, it is much worse in China right now. It is much, much worse in Europe. Yep. They're worried about their access to gas and heating, access to food, access to energy. So yes, it's going to be a pinch in the Western world, specifically the U.S. and Canada, and the leadership could get a lot better in North America. There's no doubt about that. But jump on a plane and go to the other parts in the world, and there's a reason why people are trying to get into the U.S. and not the vice versa. So as much as it sounds contrarian, I'm still very bullish on the rise of America.
I'm happy to hear that.
And I wrote the foreword to intro to the Rise of America because I said that Marin and I grew up in the same city, and that's Vancouver, British Columbia. Although Marin and I are decades apart, Vancouver, I always laugh about, is the Wild West. That's where every Frito Bandito and every deal guy was living. And, I used to go up there with our buddy Frank Crary, and we were putting resource deals together. So when I met Marin, he is the largest independent financer of resource projects. And then he came up with this carbon credits thing. And I said, I better pay attention to what he's saying because he sees something there. And if AOC can make me rich, I'm very happy about that. So, Marin, would you explain what carbon credits are?
Sure. So one carbon credit is the equivalent of taking 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent out of the atmosphere, okay, and it's certified. This has been around for about 20 years, but it was wishy-washy. Who certified these credits? What type of projects were they? And this is all coming to now a conclusion after 20 years in something called Article 6, that at COP26 in Glasgow, which, the name of the city is almost ironic that it's the dear green place, that what the Paris Accord and, COP21 in Paris in 2015, all these promises that the governments made, now in 2021 in Glasgow, they're going to be legislated, they're going to become law.
Yeah, could I say something really quickly? And Biden is now going to that conference and that Xi is not coming to, the Chinese guy's not coming to. So they're going to sign all of these laws, but China says, screw you, we're not going to participate.
Well, China has agreed to it already. It's the U.S. that haven't signed on because of what Trump did. So China's already made their commitment. Remember, using Chinese numbers, do you believe them? Maybe, maybe not. Everyone's got their own interpretation. But China is actually on board. And China has their own carbon credit system that's growing at a faster rate than in North America's. So, for example, in China, because access to energy is so important, depending on your standard of how much you've decreased your carbon emissions means, do you get access to power? And if you're not following the government mandate, they just shut the power off on you. They're not going to do that in North America or Europe, but that's the Chinese way. So the Chinese are getting this. China, from a government standpoint, is moving towards this because of their airpocalypse, which I wrote about 10 years ago, how bad their air is and how many deaths they're getting from severe asthma cases. So the COP is going to be legislated. It's coming in law. But what does this all mean? Like at the end,
wait, what does COP mean?
So it's the climate organization participation of every country. Over 195 countries have signed on to this. And it started actually from COP 21 in 1996 with the Kyoto Protocol in Japan. That was the first time. So every year, it was essentially just scientists, greenies, and diplomats. The media didn't do much with it. It really went what I call Hollywood in 2015 at COP 21 in Paris, because Hollywood stars, Leonardo DiCaprio showed up, models, singers, Bill Gates, CEOs, billionaires, all these people showed up, and then presidents showed up. Obama did his thing. So it went Hollywood, and then the media got behind it. Then, we moved to today, all these promises, but actually no one's met their promise, right? Typical government thing. Politicians love to make promises, but what politicians do, you can guarantee that they may have good intentions, but they don't know how to deliver. So now with COP26 in Glasgow, it's about how do we legislate this and make it law? And it's not just the politicians talking now. You're looking at the governments making this law. The UK has already announced that they're going to legislate this. They're going to make it law, meaning the insurance companies, Lloyd's of London, it's over 300 years old, one of the oldest insurance companies. They operate in over 200 countries in the world. You are not going to be able to get your insurance coverage for your properties if you don't play ball with the new agenda. Meaning, if an environmental disaster happens, you're not covered. And the science has come out with all the big university professors and all the scientists around the world funded by the UN. They have claimed that a 1 in 50 year climate event, the intensity of that is increased by 38.9 fold. So the insurance companies every year are getting bigger and bigger payouts. So they're saying, we're changing the game here. Now, what a lot of people don't know is the insurance company in the UK is actually the largest insurance, because it goes from UK, London, around the world, but it's actually managed by the Bank of England. So it's being legislated by the Fed. These central bankers are becoming so powerful. The Bank of Canada is doing the same thing. So now you already see rumblings in the US Fed talking about how climate change, and they're going to commit to these things. So moving forward, if there's another bailout of the airlines, they're going to have to play ball with the legislation. If you want the money for a bailout, you have to do these ESG things, reducing your carbon footprint. But how does an oil company reduce
what is the ESG?
So that's the environmental, so reducing your carbon footprint. That's the E. The S is the social. So are you just going into an area and taking out all the oil and taking out all the gold and making concrete and polluting, or are you improving the lives of the people? So there's something called the B40. The bottom 40% of the society has to be able to increase their standard of living. Also, is it just a bunch of, like you mentioned, white guys out of Canada building a gold company going somewhere in Africa, and they make all the money, but then they leave nothing for the locals? They don't educate, they don't improve the lifestyle. Is that happening, or are they increasing the standard of living and the education across the board? That's the S. And then the governance comes in as going, hey, what about the diversity? Is there, equal opportunity? Is there equal gender representation? Is there different factors of all these different, is it improving, or is it just a small group of old white dudes getting rich, like the old boys club? That's the G, the governance aspect. So the E is the environmental, S is the social, G is the governance. That's
Thank
the
you.
ESG factor. So all this is coming, but realistically, how is an oil company going to reduce its carbon footprint on a offshore oil well that they built 10 years ago and they expect to run for 25 years? Realistically, there's not much they can do in this aspect. That's why offsets are so critical. So there's something called S1, which is your scope 1 impact. That is your direct carbon emissions from your direct activities. So that's, every footprint. So if you're drilling and pumping all this oil out and shipping it to the refinery, that's an S1. So that's your scope 1. So BP, the old British petroleum company, they did an internal document report. And this is so key. Like, this is what, when people talk about where the puck is going, where the market is going, BP announced openly that if they just take $100 per ton, and everybody knows it's going a lot higher. The government's already legislated in Canada $170 per ton minimum. If you take 100, so their internal documents was like, okay, let's take the midpoint. Let's take $100. They said that they have to write down $17.5 billion of their existing assets. That's 10% of their book value. That's using $100 a ton. Well, it only goes a lot higher as the price of carbon goes higher. Well,
wait. What does it mean to write down 17?
So pretend you think you have it's no different than a manufacturing company. Let's say all the stuff in your warehouse of what you think your goods are worth, that's your book value. So if you have, a billion barrels of oil in a project that you're starting and you can pump out over 25 years, or no difference than a car dealer that has, 200 cars on his lot, multiplies by $50,000 a car, that's his book value. So BP came out with the CEO saying, we got to write down $17.5 billion of what value we thought we had at $100 per ton carbon. Okay, well, let's take all the other oil companies. Exxon, our internal numbers show about $25 billion of write-downs. Shell, same thing. So all these oil companies are sitting there going, oh, crap. All these pension funds who've invested with us because of our dividend and our value, when you write down, that's a huge, significant devaluation.
And when you say write down, it's basically you're taking the value of your company and decreasing it. Now what happens on debt covenants? These companies have incredible high debt. So the derivative effect, right, that happens in the bond market, and all the debt covenants get breached because you have to have a certain price to your book value and all these covenants that you can't violate off of your debt. There's a new black swan coming here. So what are these oil companies going to do? They have no choice but to go into the carbon sequestration market, which is a carbon credit market, the offsets, and buy certified credits that can offset that pollution, because it's way cheaper for them to fund the sequestering, the taking out of carbon out of the atmosphere, than to shut down their oil production, right? As we're transitioning from a fossil fuel energy world to a green world, there's something called reality in the middle that we have to do this transition. And without carbon credits, there is no transition. So how are the carbon credits created?
Sure. So,
who creates this?
So let's just say one of the world's most famous carbon credit projects, I'd compare it to the old Home State gold mine in South Dakota, was something called Rimba Raya, which was originally slated to be clear-cutted for a palm oil plantation, right? Kit Kats and all this palm oil demand that globally North America and China was requiring. Well, that's going to have huge effects from a biological standpoint, from chimpanzees to monkeys to just the whole biosphere aspect. So what happened was a group came involved and said, hey, don't chop this down for palm oils. We are going to use this as a project to protect and inhabit the potential to grow the trees and maintain these trees, so there is no deforestation, to be able to absorb the carbon out of the atmosphere, and you can calculate that, and it's certified by a company called Verra. Think of Verra as like the PricewaterhouseCoopers of accounting world in the carbon credit world. And the company that bought that, PwC, Delta Airlines, Google, Facebook, all of these global companies have recognized this as like the prime Homestake or the Gold Strike, the tier 1 asset. So now Delta Airlines, when you go on a flight, Robert, you and I were talking about this on your last flight, when you go even book a flight on Google Flight or whatever, it has the price and then it has your carbon footprint. And now the airlines have committed to offsetting their carbon footprint. So that's how you go and create carbon credits. You have to have a project and you have to have something called additionality factor. What are you doing to this project to prevent the deforestation? And by having this carbon credit certified, that you're adding value to the whole system that you have to be certified. So it's not like you just go to Central Park and say, I'm going to get carbon credits from this. You have to prove there's an additionality factor. So, was it going to be clear-cutted or whatever? So then you take those credits and then you can sell them to companies like Shell, BP, Exxon. So just to put this into perspective, there's about 200 million tons of carbon credits that are going to be certified this year in 2021. If Shell and Exxon wanted to just offset to meet their new board commitments, like they've been legislated, they have to do this, just those two companies would purchase over 100%. There's not enough carbon credits. So Larry Fink just came out, and the last time I was on your show, I said the first trillionaire is going to come out of this, the first unicorn trillion company, and these uber wealthy individuals are going to be the ones who solve this climate issue. Larry Fink is saying it. BlackRock just announced new funds to get into this. It is the new, this is so much bigger than Bitcoin. This is so much bigger than gold, so much bigger than the copper market. In fact, this is going to be bigger than the oil market, which makes up about 5% of global GDP. That's not me saying this. This is the biggest oil company and oil traders in the world who are saying this. So they're all positioning themselves into it.
Quick question. So these people, this group finds a project, it gets authorized, and then is it the companies that are buying these carbon credits that are funding these projects? Is that how they're funded?
Sometimes it happens. So, for example, they've been late to the game. So if you're going to go to an area that's been deforested and you want to replant it, well, it takes 20 years for these trees to grow. So they're not going to get those credits certified till 20 years out or 15 years out, depending on whether you're going poplar or pine or whatever trees you're growing. There's many different ways to do this. For example, let's just say you are a company that goes and says you want to refurbish all of the old lights, the incandescent lights in all the office towers in North America, and you want to put LED. So a company will fund, they'll go to the owners of all these buildings, the REITs, and say, hey, we'll pay for your lights. We'll pay for the guys to come in and change the lights. But give us the carbon credits that we're going to be able to certify mathematically versus incandescent versus an LED because of the difference in energy usage. That additionality factor issues you a carbon credit, and then you can sell that to Shell or Facebook or Google or whoever needs it. That's how it goes.
Well, thank you for that. We're going to take a break, but that's as clear as I've heard it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, yeah.
So we come back by going more into why Marin positively says this is bigger than Bitcoin, gold, and oil. It's carbon credits. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today we're talking about a very hot subject. It's called carbon credits. And just FYI, Rich Dad we do not recommend, or we're not financial advisors. You have to check it out for yourself. But we're talking about possibly the biggest investment you'll ever hear about in your lifetime. It's called carbon credits. And again, we don't recommend it. And for full disclosure, Kim and I are investors in it. Any comments, Kim?
Well, here's what I love is that here's this Green New Deal that's coming all over the world, right? And it's the capitalists that are going to figure out how to not just profit, but actually to contribute and do some good work. But it's the capitalists that are going to do well, not the politicians. Like, although there'll be stuff in their pockets. They'll get theirs, no doubt about it. But it's the capitalists that are going to make things happen. So that's why I'm loving this conversation with Marin Katusa.
And so Marin Katusa is the author of the book, The Rise of America, which I write the intro for it. And like I said, Marin and I grew up in the same city. It's called Vancouver, British Columbia, at different times, but it's the place where all the deals, the hopes and dreams are made. And it is the cowboys are out there. But anyway, we're talking about the Green New Deal. Could you talk about the Blue Deal, Marin?
So there's 3 types of carbon credits that you really need to focus on. There's blue carbon, and blue carbon are aquatic or ocean credits, water credits. And why I believe the blue carbon credits are going to be the most valuable and the largest upside for investors is, like gold, it's a lot harder to find than silver or copper, so it's worth a lot more. But the impact from an environmental standpoint, for example, 1 square mile of mangrove forests or ocean credits absorb 10 times more carbon out of the atmosphere, so you get 10 times more carbon credits than the same plot of land in a forest, so you get 10 times more there. But interestingly enough also, the biodiversity effect, because you got it on land and underwater, you have a 10 times larger effect in the biodiversity factor, from the algae to the coral to the turtles to the bird sanctuaries involved. And what's going on right now in the mangrove forest, a lot of people aren't talking about it, but it's getting deforested at a greater rate than the Amazon rainforest. Right. Everybody's talking about the Amazon rainforest, and it is horrible destruction what's going on there. But for whatever reason, everyone's being hush-hush about the mangrove forest being deforested because these Chinese shrimp farming companies are they're doing shrimp farming because everybody likes dynamite rolls or all the uses for shrimp. There's not enough organic, natural ways to farm the shrimp, that most of the shrimp you're getting from your grocery store or eating in your sushi rolls are coming from these deforested mangrove areas. So that's why blue carbon credits are going to be worth so much, and they are in the market right now. They're the most valuable credits. Then you have green carbon credits, so think of those as green, forest on land. And then you have white carbon credits, which are the air credits, the airline credits, or the energy fuel switching credits. If you have a utility that used to produce energy from coal and they're switching to, say, wind farm, they're going to get a carbon credit for that difference because they're not emitting pollution out of the atmosphere. So there's blue, green, and white carbon credits.
And the way your fund, our fund, works is that there's no debt and all profits keep going to acquiring more carbon credit.
And a lot of the profits are going back into the ground because you have to maintain. The technology is so incredible. This is Silicon Valley stuff in real time today. So meaning you can actually, remember we talked about the S and G factor, rather than just going and hiring the local indigenous community wherever you are to, for example, just do rock samples or drive trucks at a mine, you're enabling them with technology, like an iPhone. Sure.
Let me interrupt. When you talk about the indigenous local people and empowering them, these are your rangers, you call them?
I call them the carbon rangers. Because,
carbon rangers, okay.
And let me tell you some background where I came up with it. I built a lot of mines and financed a lot of mines around the world. And generally speaking, you're initially met with distrust because the sector has not delivered on promises because it's such a volatile resource. Building a copper mine takes a long time, takes a lot of money. So some of the locals wanted the job, some of them didn't want it. They were worried about the environmental impacts. And the local indigenous community took the role of protecting the environment, and you respect that. So when I started doing this and becoming one of the largest investors globally in this carbon credit sector, I realized that these are my allies. These are my brothers in arms. And I came up with the carbon ranger aspect. But what did they lack? They lack the technology. So I created every financing I do, there's no finder fees. That's why bankers hate what I do. I don't take a 7%, finder's fee and 7% in broker warrants. It all goes into something called the Carbon Rangers Fund, which funds the technology. And what does this mean? It means these local indigenous people will have access to 5G in this area. But what does that really mean? Now it means using this new LiDAR technology with incredible accuracy, you could see the label of the chainsaw of the illegal guys trying to come and harvest the trees, or illegal hunters in the area, or, for example, the humidity and temperature. You can prevent or try to prevent the forest fires rather than being reactionary while all the trees get cut, trying to chase them after. Well, at that point, who cares? All the trees are cut. Or if they're doing illegal hunting, or worse, look at all the forest fires going on in the West Coast over the last few years. We see the intensity increasing because the governments have done nothing about this. They're not being preventatory, they're just reactionary. Well, it's better to prevent a heart attack than deal with the post-heart attack effects, and that's what Carbon Rangers is all about. And wherever we're going around the world, we're enabling the local indigenous people to become superheroes of the environment. And we're going to teach them using technology that they already understand, bringing 5G, bringing the technology in the language that they understand. And the wild thing is, this is not costing hundreds of billions of dollars to do it. We're doing it in real time, and the company's making money, and the paybacks on the existing investments are better than any project in the resource sector globally. So it's a win-win for everybody.
And when you were pitching me this deal and explaining it to me, the thing I like about it, the Carbon Ranger doesn't have to go to Stanford or Harvard for a PhD, do they?
No. And here's the thing. Neither did Elon Musk, and his company is worth more than all 10 of the largest automobile companies in the world. And Bill Gates went and quit and still did it, right? The point is, it's the doers of society. And everybody wants to do good. Like, I've never met an evil person that says, I want to destroy all the forests in the world. Like, no, everybody wants to do good, but you have to enable that.
Right.
And the governments haven't done that.
You know, I'm a hunter, and I go into some of these indigenous villages, and they're depressed. You know what I mean? They have no jobs. The kids got no place to go. So when you were talking to me about Carbon Rangers, these kids will have a lifetime profession.
And high paying.
And
it's going to be
high-paying.
cool. I don't want to get into the debates of, when I grew up, when I saw a police officer, they were greatly respected. You'd wave at them. They were kind of like the cool superhero guys. Same with the firemen. The Carbon Rangers are going to be that status of when I was a kid for the blue and the red. So this is going to be an incredible growing, and I think it's going to get into a big thing. And, you really find out when the market catches on to this and the investors are catching on to this. And more importantly, Shell, Exxon, BP, they're all in the market trying to figure out how do we buy this, because we know this is where it's going. And this is the one thing that if you're watching this video and you're like, okay, obviously if you're watching Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you already want to have more in life. You want to do better. You want to improve your financial situation. And I believe personal freedom through financial independence. That's been a thing. Like, I grew up with immigrant parents. We didn't have much. We had a lot of love, incredible family, but I didn't start out with much. But this is an opportunity. Anybody watching this, whether you're me or the person watching this, we're all on the even foot when it comes to carbon credits. Whether you're in Moscow or in Africa, Argentina, you're in Brazil, anyone with a will, there's a way to do this. And you don't need, to be worth billions of dollars to get into this. Where, if you want to buy a gold mine, it's going to cost you a lot of money to buy this thing and develop it and the equipment.
You know about that.
This is a different game.
That's why I said we grew up in the same city, Vancouver, British Columbia. And the quick story is the first gold mine I went to look at, it was the indigenous people. I was way up in the Andes, about 14,000 feet. I couldn't even breathe. And these people are sitting up there and they're going, what are you going to do to our environment? And that was in Peru with Shining Path, and the terrorists were attacking us and all this stuff. And so when you talk to me about carbon credits and what it does for the environment and the indigenous people, then I was in.
It's really incredible. If you go back to about a year and a half ago on your show, you gave me a platform to explain from a resource standpoint the effect of the positive swap lines and negative swap lines. Every week, we're watching the nationalization of foreign-owned or American-owned base metal companies or precious metal companies where the government's saying, not so fast. We want more of that take. With carbon credits, it's very different. What are we doing? We're coming to an area. We're investing all this money. We're educating the locals. We're giving them equipment to empower themselves, to improve the atmosphere. And what are we taking out of the ground? Absolutely nothing. We're adding to the ground. Then in New York City, you get issued this credit by the certified company, Vera, and then you take that credit and you sell it to BP or Exxon or Facebook or Google or Delta Airlines, who are craving these credits. Literally right now, the biggest oil companies in the world are phoning to buy 20-year deals on these carbon credits. This is just starting.
So, Marin, and your projects are global, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Are there other companies that are going to be jumping in here and doing what you
definitely.
do?
Definitely. And I encourage, you wouldn't believe how many of the big bankers in the finance, hey, Marin, there's going to be another company. I go, great. That's good for everybody. From an investor standpoint, be very careful, because you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of copycats that are just looking to sell you paper and a dream, and you're going to be left holding the bag with nothing. Make sure, it's simple rules, guys. When you invest, at what price did the management invest in? Do they have skin in the game? Do they have cash? Is this real? Are the people real? And is the business plan real? There's going to be many companies, and just like in any sector, whether it's the tech sector, the gold sector, whatever, biotech sector, you're going to have some companies that do really, really well, and many that will try and fail. But you just look at the people, the balance sheet, and where they're going with what type of business idea. So it's not just going to be companies that are looking at nature-based carbon sequestering. You're going to see companies doing light bulbs, concrete companies. Remember, for this stat will blow your mind. China alone, just from their concrete consumption, and concrete produced in China, they produce more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than every internal combustion engine on the planet combined annually. So there's a huge opportunity. So there's lots of companies that are trying to figure out, hey, when we take a ton of limestone and we heat it up and we produce cement, and then cement's used with aggregate to produce concrete, you emit 1 ton of CO2, 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So there's a lot of companies that are going, well, if we can, sequester that back into the concrete, or sequester it into the ground, into a sink, as they call it, how do we deal with these different aspects? So there's a lot of technology. We're in the early days. If you think about this as like the tech run of 2000, we're maybe in 1983, just before 82, just before Apple went public and before Microsoft went public. We're very early days. And the insurance companies, the central banks, the pension funds, they've all signed up to this. So whether you believe in climate change or in rising temperatures resolved because of human activity is irrelevant. It's like a debate on whether there's a God or not. It's irrelevant. But if I can take a royalty on the Catholic Church at 5 cents on the dollar, I'm going to be the first guy in line to do that.
We're going to be deplatformed for that one. But anyway.
Love it.
Hey,
and I'm Catholic, so I'm allowed to say that. I grew up Catholic. So,
a quick question. The thing about nationalizing mines and things like this, plus swap mines. Would you quickly go over what that means? Because when Kim and I were in Vancouver we put together one of the biggest gold mines in China, and they nationalized it. They took it from us. So would you explain how that works?
After we found the gold.
After we found
Not
the
before.
gold.
Not when we put all the money and got the investors and did all the work. No.
So essentially 14 nations are lined up with the U.S. Fed. And this is kind of one of the chapters I talked about in my book. You got to follow the money. And there's 14 countries that have been assigned by the U.S. government as true allies. And what does a true ally mean? I'm willing to lend you money when you really need it. And that's called a swap line. Then everyone else does not have a swap line. So at the end of the day, most of the global debt is done in U.S. dollars. And these local governments are looking at, these gold producers or copper producers or iron ore producers. And the way these things are structured with tax havens, that's why the governments are all trying to create this minimum tax globally, because the local governments, whether it's Argentina where money goes to die, or Peru, or Chile's changing the tax code on the price of copper, the higher the price goes, the more the government takes in the taxes. That's a form of nationalization. Just recently, we saw one of the largest gold producers get their big 20 million ounce gold deposit chopped off at the head. The government's saying, nope, you can't do that, after they've spent 30 years exploring, developing, and doing all the work required to put it into production. The government's going to take it, and then they're going to try to do what they want to do with it. So when you're a negative swap line, look at Turkey, for example. Why you would want, as a U.S. or a foreigner, to have assets in Turkey blows my mind. Because A, they don't have swap lines. B, Erdogan is in desperate need of U.S. dollars. Even if you produce something in Turkey and you sell that gold, you can't take that dollars, those U.S. dollars, and send them out. You got to exchange them at the government rate. And when's the last time the government rate was the real street rate? So you're going to get dinged every step of the way. So keep it simple. Warren Buffett became one of the greatest investors, probably the greatest investor of all time, by sticking to his framework. Keep it simple. Like, I've done it. I've put the body armor on. I've hired the French Foreign Legion when we were going through Iraq, and you know, whether it was in Kuwait or in Kosovo when it just declared independence from Yugoslavia. I've been there and done that. And it sounds cool to be the Indiana Jones of, you know, resources and going on a camel or a donkey through the jungle. That's good for Hollywood. It's not good for your bank account. Okay, so keep it simple. Go to areas that respect the rule of law, that respect title, expect increasing taxes globally, because that's the one thing that politicians are successful at implementing is more taxes. But keep it simple. Look at the infrastructure. So my thesis is very simple. If you're looking for resources, don't go to places where the rule of law doesn't matter.
That's
Good
what
point.
we did in China.
Yep.
So anyway, Marion, I want to really thank you for explaining and keeping it simple for more and more people to understand what you're doing. And, you know, Kim and I really are environmentalists. Everywhere we go, we plant trees, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I tell people I'm a tree hugger, they say, well, you're digging up the ground. I say, yeah, but we do put trees in there. Anyway, I'm glad we're doing what we're doing, is going more and more, should I say, socialist. You know, it's like they say, what Marx said is the number one rule of communism was the abolition of private property, and that's when China took our gold mine. And I learned the hard way that's what it meant. So that's why I'd rather hang out with you, because you and I have been in Vancouver for all these years. We've heard every shonky deal possible, but that's how you get smarter. But anyway, I thank you. How do people invest? I mean, again, we don't make any recommendations, but how do people find out more? So
what I've done, I am invested in a company that's publicly listed. It's the largest player in the sector. So like, I don't want to invest in some startup junior with no cash. I just don't like that. So it's called Carbon Streaming Corp. It's a publicly listed company. I think they list later this year on the NASDAQ. They're already listed on the US and Canadian exchange. That's one way to play it. Others can play it, you know, with these. A lot of my buddies are angel investors, and they're trying to fund startups. That's riskier. You can also go to a website. Probably the best information on this is called carboncredits.com, and they really explain all the granulars and details. Look, it's easier today than ever before to get access to information. You know, I play hockey with these young guys. I'm trying to get fit again, and you know, a couple times a week I get together with these young guys, and I just listen in the locker room, and I tell them, I go, my God, the amount of time you guys talk about and spend on fantasy sports, like they bet on all these sports, like did the quarterback throw the ball 5 times or 10 times, you know, they bet on this stuff. And I sit there, I'm going, holy crap. I go, if you guys just spent half of the time that you spend on fantasy sports into educating yourself, you're going to be very, very wealthy by the time you're my age. And I'm like 20 years older than these guys, and I'm doing it to be young and stay fit and healthy, but I'm kind of giving them tips. And it's never like back in my day, you had to go to the library and I'd do the old microfiche and go through all the historical data. Now you just go on Google and you get all the data for yourselves. So go to carboncredits.com, educate yourself. You know, rather than binging on Netflix, empower yourself, because there's nothing, you know, being rich ain't going to make you happy, but it's going to get you pretty damn close to that boat that says happiness.
Now, the happiness is the fun of the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is. Yes, that's why I loved Vancouver. I always talk about how much fun I had up there. And can you tell us about Katusa Research?
Yeah, Katusa Research. So I started this to become the largest platform for access to deal flow, and we've achieved it. We're the largest independent research firm for the resource sector. We've shifted from, you know, being the 5 largest ever financings in Canada are from our group. I don't take fees. We use that to fund all my gold mines that we fund, or any project has Carbon Ranger Fund, and then we're doing our plan there. And then now we're really pushing into the carbon credit sector, because here's a really cool fact for you guys. In the resource sector, it's something like 90 to 95% of the investors are male, over 60, and old white dudes. That's the data. Interestingly enough, my subscriber base is a little over 50% female between the ages of 35 and 55. So the demographics are shifting. Some are interested in the golds, but not so much. It's the climate. And when you look at the demographics and data, the women are the bosses in the house most of the time. They run the fold. And now they're getting into a place where they're running the finances and they see where it's going. And it's incredible feedback. You've got to look at the data and the demographics. And this area is just starting. Imagine being able to invest in the technology sector, knowing what the internet is. Imagine if everybody told you what the internet was, and we need apps and we need smartphones. The government is literally saying we are going to make the price of carbon credits $170 a ton. And we need people to figure out how to do this because we can't do it. And here's the platform, and this is what's happening. It's been laid out by the central bankers, by the governments, and then the big oil companies are going, where can we buy these carbon credits from? How you become uber rich is by solving a problem that the market needs, and that right now is carbon credits.
So, Marion, thank you very much. Thank you for being such a great educator and a friend and a fellow. We love the environment.
We don't get into the debate whether of all those debates. We just like to do good work. Yeah,
exactly.
We just like to do good work.
We just invest.
So we're very aligned.
Anyway, thank you very much, my friend. And again, we don't recommend anything, but please check out what Marion has to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Marion.
And we'll be right back. Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, The Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. I want to thank Marion Cattusa, author of his latest book, The Rise of America, and the biggest investment opportunity of our lifetimes, bigger than Bitcoin, oil, and gold. It's carbon credits. And as much as I don't like environmentalists shoving stuff down my throat, I am an environmentalist. Every place I go. When we left Hawaii, we planted trees.
Yeah. Well, there's real environmentalists and fake environmentalists, and I think the politicians and all are manipulating the information we're getting, but we are true environmentalists. We do our best to protect the oceans, to plant trees, feed all our fish.
And the good news is the socialists push it, but the capitalists get rich. Everybody understand that one?
Yeah. See, that's what I like. Marion writes the book, The Rise of America. He's like this optimistic guy, but when he explains it, it makes sense compared to other countries, even though all the craziness that's going on right now. But then he finds the opportunity in this Green New Deal, finds the opportunity, and that's what a capitalist does. Always looks for the opportunity and then goes after it.
And Marion was in the same genre that Kim and I were in with Frank Crary. We're in the resources, and resources are dirty. We rip places up. Because I've been at 14,000 feet in Peru, and the indigenous people get screwed, And so when he pitched a deal to me about his carbon credit deal, it's spiritual to me. My heart's in it. Because if I could help the indigenous people not screw them, that's even better. You know what I mean? And they can get rich, and he says they become like the police officers and they're protectors of the environment, even though they're socialists and communists. But the capitalists will still make money. So anyway, Sarah, what do you think?
Just to that point, I think it's interesting that it's not just digging for gold and planting a tree to replace it. It's what Marion described, like it's a longer lasting generational, I don't want to say wealth building, but you're ensuring jobs in that community, or you're ensuring, wealth in that for those families that are working. So it's much different. It's much deeper or bigger than just planting a tree.
I think also he's bringing awareness. I didn't know about, the Amazon was one thing, but these mangroves are a whole nother deal. I had no idea. So he's also bringing awareness of what's happening, what's happening environmentally in the world. I think that's really important.
I will say I probably have taken the most notes for this show because Marion is a wealth of knowledge, and a fire hose, we say that about Jim Rickards or whatever, but the way he describes it, it really makes sense. He keeps it simple, which I think is great for our audience. But we talked about carbon credits almost a year ago with him, or maybe 8 months ago. Back then, I had no clue, but he told the story differently. So it is another episode where I think people need to re-listen and find, and it'll sink in what he's talking about.
Right. It's a feel good type of get rich project.
Yeah,
which I like.
Get rich and do good. What better can you have?
It's the same as Rich Dad. We do this because it empowers people. We don't have to sell people shonky stuff. And once again, we really state we do not make recommendations. If you're going to invest in what Marion talked about, please check it out for yourself. But anyway, I thank you all listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're purely educational, but most importantly, can we do good financially by doing good for everybody? Thank you for listening to the Rich Dad Show.